Chapter 1. An Evening over Arendelle. If you find comfort in these gentle, sleepy journeys, you can subscribe so that every new story arrives quietly when you're ready to rest. No alarms, no rush, only soft pages and slow waves. Now breathe in and let us begin. The evening settles across the kingdom of Arendelle like a velvet shawl, quietly, kindly, with a calm that asks nothing of you at all. The sky is the color of blueberries dipped in milk, pale at the edges where the sea lifts its breath and darker toward the line of the mountains. Lights bloom in the castle windows one by one, small stars behind glass, as if the stone itself is beginning to dream. The fjord bears its own kind of lullaby. Low water against wooden pilings, a boat rope creaking, a soft clink of mast rings. Far across the water, a bell calls a final note for the day and then rests. You can feel the kingdom exhale. Markets close. Doors draw in their lamplight. Footsteps turn homeward. Even the gulls grow quiet, folding their white wings like closed letters. Imagine yourself at the top of the long harbor road. You have walked slowly, unhurried, with the evening, and now you pause where you can see almost everything. The houses lean toward one another as if whispering good night. Shutters prop open to let out the last warmth from cook fires. The scent of fresh bread lingers, butter and cinnamon, a memory that floats down the lane and will not hurry away. A baker sweeps flour from the sill. A fisherman coils the last of his line. Children draw chalk shapes that will fade with the night dew, tiny maps to secret kingdoms that only last until morning. Behind it all rises the castle, pale stone touched with rose where the sun fell an hour ago. The banners are at rest. Their fabric hangs in sleepy folds, the colors deep and sure in the thinning light. Somewhere within those walls, a piano breathes a slow waltz, only a handful of notes, the kind that visit and then disappear. The waltz is not a message. It is not a plan. It is only the sound a quiet place makes when it feels safe. Up on the balcony, the air tastes like clean water. The North Mountain is a shape against the sky, strong and kind, with the last of the evening tucked about its shoulders. Sometimes, if you watch long enough, you can see the mountain gather a thin veil of silver, a secret halo that belongs to the cold. The silver moves as if it remembers a song, but the song is so gentle that even the wind yawns and pulls a blanket over its ears. Down in the harbor, the last boat slides in. There is no hurry. Nets are lifted and folded the way a mother folds a blanket over a sleeping child. A lamp is carried to the dock edge and set down. In its glow, the ropes look like old gold. You can hear soft voices. You cannot hear the words, and you do not need to. The voices say what all end-of-day voices say. Good night. Be well. See you in the morning. The evening has 1,000 hands, and every one of them is gentle. It bends the grasses along the meadow, brushing seed heads until they forget to stand tall. It smooths the mirror of the fjord, laying it flat like a page. It polishes the cobbles under your feet until the stones give back a little of the sky. The world is not sleeping yet, but it has chosen to stop trying so hard. A slow smile touches the corners of everything. A cat crosses the lane and looks up at you, as if to say that it knows the secret of nights like this. The cat is gray, the kind of gray that absorbs candlelight and sends it back as a purr. It sits, it blinks, and then it continues along the edge of a hedge. Its tail draws a soft question mark in the air. The only answer is the sound of someone humming a lullaby behind a door that is not yours. That is enough. Beyond the houses, the hillside has begun to collect stars. They come down early here, gathering low first, as if they like to know the people before the people go to sleep. You can count them if you want to, but there is no prize for reaching the end. They will keep arriving whether or not you count. That is what stars do when they feel welcome. A snowflake appears. Only one. It lands on the railing by your hand and sits there quietly. In the last blue of the day, it is not white at all. It is glassy and faint. It looks like a thought that you forgot you were thinking. Another snowflake follows it, and another. They are not cold. Or perhaps they are kind enough to keep their cold to themselves. They do not gather or hurry. They do not ask the world to change for them. They only fall as if they remember a promise from long ago and want to keep it softly. You look up, and for a moment you think there must be a cloud above you. There is not. The sky is clear. The snow is light as breath, like a secret given to the air. It drifts and then stops, as if to say, "We only came to say hello." The last of the flakes rests on the stone rail and does not melt. It keeps its shape. It keeps its silence. It keeps the feeling of a door opening somewhere in the dark. Not a door you can see, but a door in the story of this place. In the village, a candle is set in a window. It is the first to appear and the last to go out each night. Some say the candle has burned there since the founding of Arendelle, that it has shared its flame with every hearth in every winter, and that it remembers each face that has warmed its hands beside it. The flame lifts and bows and lifts again. A shadow crosses it, then leaves it be. So many things pass by the constant heart of a place. The candle remains, breath in a little window. Steady, sure. As the evening deepens, the fjord sends a letter to the sky. A soft stripe of silver slips along the water, and the sky answers with the first thin green ribbon of the northern lights. It is not a show tonight. It is not a spectacle. It is a friendly greeting, a neighbor leaning over the fence to ask if you need anything from the shop. The ribbon stretches, softens, and then rests right where it is. There is time for brightness on another night. Tonight the world prefers to whisper. You stand there long enough to feel your shoulders let go. Not a drop, not a slump. Only an untying, a little space where there was a knot. You did not know it was there. You do now. The stars notice, they nod to one another and settle deeper into their chairs. Behind you a door opens. There is a hallway with a long runner of woven blue. The runner looks like river water. It sways slightly, although there is no wind. You step inside and let the evening come with you, hanging it on a peg by the door like a shawl you plan to use again soon. A steward nods a hello and moves away with the soundless steps of someone who was born to be exactly where they are. You move into a room with wide windows. The fjord is a picture on the wall, framed by velvet curtains. A table waits with a pot of steaming tea, and a second pot of warm milk, and a small plate of honey biscuits that are too kind to argue with sleep. Outside, the mountain wears its pale crown. Inside, the fire shifts its feet and finds a more comfortable place to sit. The piano speaks again, a few notes only, and then smiles and says nothing more. Sometimes music is not meant to be played through. Sometimes it is meant to make a place for listening. You listen and there is something to hear. The hush has words in it, even if they are not words you can say out loud. They tell how the town came to be here. They tell why the mountain waited. They tell of a river of memories that lives in the north and sings when the moon is kind. They tell of doors that were shut and opened again, of a love that learned to be strong by learning first to be soft. The first chapter of a kingdom always arrives like this, on a night when the wind is gentle and the water is sure, and a handful of snowflakes make up their mind to be present. You feel the story begin around you the way a quilt begins to warm your legs before it warms your feet. You do not need to do anything. The story has already decided to carry you. Sit back. Take a sip of warm milk. Let your eyes go soft. We are only visiting, and the kingdom is glad to have company. It has been almost too quiet lately. Quiet is lovely. Company is lovely too. There is room for both. We begin very gently, with the first lights that ever lived in this place, before stone, before sail, before the first door had a hinge, before the first song had a name. We begin with a shoreline and a sky and a promise. We begin with the founding of a kingdom by the fjord. Chapter 2. The Founding of the Fjord Kingdom. Long before the castle lifted its towers over the water, there was a shoreline with a slope soft enough to welcome tired feet. The fjord already knew how to cup the sea in its hands. It already knew how to hold a boat still while people learned to trust it. The mountains already knew how to stand in a way that kept most of the storms a little farther out. The world was ready before the people were. They arrived by a small ship with a square sail. The sail was patched and brave. The wood of the hull had learned 1,000 songs on 1,000 waves, yet it made a new one here, a quiet tune that belonged only to this place. The families stepped onto the rocks and stood listening. The rocks said nothing. They did not need to. The air was green with pine and clean with salt, and the water, as it lifted and set down, was a hand saying, "Here, here, here." They unpacked in the way all beginnings are unpacked. A chest with wool sweaters and a cast-iron pot, a rolled net made of care and twine, a candle kept in a clay cup, seeds wrapped in cloth, a sleeping child who woke briefly and looked at the sky as if she had seen it before, and then fell asleep again as if she trusted it now. They built a longhouse first, 1 room, many beds, a fire at the center. The roof was steep to shrug off snow. The walls breathed a little in the wind, and the wind learned to speak more softly. They did not build fences. They did not need to. The mountains were a kind of fence, and the water was a kind of road, and between the two a field lay waiting with its palms open, curious about the seeds in the cloth bundle. The first market was only a table. Someone brought fish, bright as coins in the morning. Someone brought bread. Someone brought wool, combed and ready for fingers. Someone brought stories that had been given to them by a grandmother who had been given them by a star. People gathered, and the market was a market, even though there were only 7 people and a child who had learned how to clap. They named the place a soft name that meant shore-room in the old tongue, a space the sea had made for them. The name would change. Names do. What matters is that the name had a gentle bend to it, like a knee that kneels before a fire to warm a child's hands. The first winter came early. Frost lay over the field like lace. The longhouse breathed sleep and smoke and stew. The people learned the rhythm of this fjord. Nets in the dark, nets in the afternoon, nets in the dreaming time between, when the light is not sure what to do with itself. The sea gave. The people said thank you aloud. The sea pretended not to hear and gave again. Stories gathered quickly. Places make stories out of air, the way a glass gathers dew. The settlers would come in from the water, set their oars quiet, and begin. They spoke of a return of strange lights in the far north. They spoke of a herd of reindeer that moved like a river and turned when the sky did. They spoke of a wind that had a polite habit of knocking before it opened the door. There were older people in the hills who already knew these things. Their tents were low and warm. Their fires wore kettles the color of old sunlight. They traveled lightly and stayed carefully, listening to the spirits who liked to travel more than they did. The newcomers and the older ones met, not once, but many times, and even when they did not share words, they shared the shape of their hands around a cup. That was enough. Some nights, from the longhouse door, you could hear the world turn. It was not a sound like a wheel. It was more like the sound of someone settling into a comfortable chair. The child who had looked at the sky on the day of arrival grew into a child who could carry a basket and not drop it. She learned to sing in the way a place teaches you to sing, slowly, with pauses, so the rest of the world can sing back. Spring pressed its thumbprint into the ground. Snow loosened. The river that fed the fjord began to hum. You could put your ear to the earth and hear water under the skin of everything. The first shoots of barley pushed up. They wore tiny green caps and were amazed at everything. The people were amazed at them. Everyone was amazed at everyone. It was a very polite time. The first gathering hall rose beside the longhouse. It was not grand. It was good. A bench along the far wall had a smooth dip where hands had rested. The door latch had a habit of squeaking twice and then not at all, and the people grew fond of it. If you stood at the door in the late afternoon, you could see the fjord hold a slice of sun like a bowl holds milk. That view was the first royal tapestry, though there was no tapestry yet and no royalty either. A place can wear its own crown long before anyone thinks to call it that. They learned how sound travels across water. A child laughing at the far dock could seem to be laughing right beside you. A song sung in a boat felt as if it rose under the boat, not above it. In the evenings the older ones would hum, and the younger ones would listen, and the water would put a soft halo around the notes and carry them along the rocks and around the bend, as if it meant to deliver them to someone who was waiting. Perhaps someone was. Perhaps the mountain listens every night. The first omen came on a warm night that should have been only warm. That is how omens often arrive, not with thunder, but with a small surprise in a gentle place. A field mouse ran in a wide, calm circle and then sat as if remembering something from before it was born. The air cooled slightly, although the fire was still strong. And in the open square of the sky above the longhouse roof, a thread of pale light stretched and curled, then vanished like a sigh. No one was afraid. Someone said that was lovely. Someone else said it will be a good harvest. The mouse went to sleep behind a basket and did not dream. Years layered themselves the way blankets do on a deep winter night. Needed, then needed again. The patchwork of cottages grew. The market became a path of stalls and laughter. The first school was a corner of the gathering hall, where a window knew how to pour its light without spilling. Children learned letters by tracing their fingers over salted boards. They learned numbers by counting the gulls that liked the highest roof. They learned history by sitting very still and letting it tell itself. It was on a certain evening that the folk elected a keeper of the peace. not because there was trouble, but because there was a lot of quiet, and quiet is heavy to carry without a careful hand. The keeper was a woman who had a habit of smiling with her eyes before her mouth. She listened well, and when she spoke, people heard the sound of the fjord in her words, patient and strong. She did not call herself queen. No one did. Names take their time. She moved through the village in a cloak the color of smoke, and she put her hand on the door frame of each house and said the same thing every time. Be warm, be well, be welcome. She said it because her grandmother had said it. She said it because the place seemed to like it. The day the crest was made, the sky was a glossy blue, new from the wash. The people chose the fjord line as the center, the mountain above it, the river running into it, and a snowflake that could be mistaken for a star. They stitched the crest into a field of green, then into a field of blue, then into a field of white to see which one felt right. All three were right, and so 3 banners were made and hung in 3 places. The wind approved, took a slow breath, and made them ripple with the lightest of hands. On the long light of midsummer, a circle of stones was set on the hill above the harbor. Not ancient, but made to feel as if it belonged to ancient things. People brought gifts to the circle, not gold, not jewels, a spoon that stirred a family's first soup in this place, a broken oar that had been mended and mended again, a song sung for the first time, 2 stones shaped like hearts and placed side by side, a promise that no one wrote down. The circle held them all and did not speak. Not all days were easy. Nets tore, hands bled. A storm learned the way into the fjord and forgot the way out. A roof slipped a little under heavy snow, but the place itself kept a steady clock in its bones, and people learned to keep their small clocks by it. On hard days, the longhouse glowed in the deep night like a coal that refuses to stop being warm. On hard days, the elders told a story about the north, about spirits that did not belong to fear, about lights that came not to warn but to remind. Now, once a trader arrived with a cart of bright cloth, blues deep enough that you could fall into them, reds that made you feel brave without trying, yellows that remembered the sun on its best day. He told of a people beyond the forest who did not carve the earth with houses in the same way, who left room for the wind to enter their door without knocking. He spoke of a river in the north that was called a river and not a river, because it had all the water of memory in it. The people listened, and the keeper of the peace listened longer, and the trader slept by the fire and dreamed of a field that grew light instead of grain. The first child born entirely in the new place had eyes the color of the fjord. When she cried, the sound seemed to stretch and soften like a line of cloud at dusk. When she slept, the dog slept, and the cat slept, and the house learned that sleep is a kind of blessing that arrives without being asked, and stays as long as you let it. The child grew into a walker of edges, the first to run all the way to the bend and all the way back without stopping. She learned the taste of snowflakes on her tongue and the meaning of the quiet sigh that the steep pines make after the morning rain. Around the 7th harvest, a small stone wall was raised along the harbor road, not to keep anything out, to keep people from falling in when the fog liked to nibble at the edges of the world. The fog was not offended. It still visited. It rolled up from the water with the kindness of someone bringing extra blankets, and when it left, the stones were damp and pleased, as if they had been kissed by the sky. The keeper of the peace taught the people to mark the year not only by seasons, but by small human kindnesses. A day for mending things for others, A day for listening to someone younger than you are. A day for carrying a story from one door to another like bread. A day for not speaking if all your words would be heavy. A day for lighting every window at once, so the hills could count the houses and make sure no one was missing. This last day became the favorite. From far away on the water, the village looked like a bowl of stars with a handle on it. Ships turned in from the open sea just to see the glow. Even if they had no business in the harbor, they were not turned away. New faces are simply a different shape of old stories. It was late in a certain autumn that the first snowfall arrived in a way that would be remembered. The flakes were slow and broad. They landed with the weight of feathers and then held very still, as if they did not wish to wake the ground. In the morning, the world had that early winter hush, as if the earth had placed a finger on its lips and smiled. Children pressed their fingers into the snow and lifted perfect shapes of their hands. Women brushed the path with brooms that made soft music. Men moved the boats towards safer water and talked about nothing in particular, which is the kind of talk that holds a village together. The keeper looked at the first snow and said, "There is something old in it," as if the snow had walked these paths in another time and was happy to be back. She listened for something in the air and almost heard it. The almost was enough. She turned her face toward the north for a long time, not searching, greeting. They were not a kingdom yet. They were not a kingdom either. They were a people who had learned the shape of a place, and the place had learned the shape of them. The banner hung in the gathering hall. Beside it hung a map of the fjord that a boy had drawn with careful hands. It showed the channel where the herring liked to turn. It showed the sheltered cove where seals rested like smooth stones. It showed a dotted line where he hoped to sail when he was older. He drew stars where he thought they would be. The stars approved. In the 8th winter, in the deep blue hour of the afternoon that belongs mostly to candles, the keeper stood at the door of the hall and raised both hands. The people gathered, so many that the warm air made a cloud above them. The keeper's voice was not loud and did not need to be. "We have built together," she said. "We have listened together. We have learned to see what is here. It is time to call this place by a name that shows our promise to keep it and to keep one another." A murmur moved through the crowd, pleased and tender, like the inside of a seashell. She spoke the name that would grow into Arendelle, a name that remembered the ear of the land, a name that carried the sound of the fjord in it. The people said the name after her first, then softer still. Names like this prefer to arrive on the breath you use for lullabies. The snowflakes outside pressed their faces to the window panes to listen. The banner with the fjord and the mountain and the snow star was raised, and the wind made its small nod. The mountains stood exactly as they had always stood, but somehow they felt nearer. The water lifted one small wave and set it down again. The children clapped. The dog barked once and was embarrassed and wagged, and then lay down on its side. If a queen had stood there that night, it would have been a quiet kind of queen. If a crown had shone there, it would have been the frost on a window, glinting for a second when a candle moved. The people did not need those things yet, not then. They had a room with light in it. They had a name that fit. They had a place that let them sleep and wake and sleep again. Before the night ended, the northern lights laid a soft green ribbon across the sky. You might have thought it was only luck. Perhaps. But some in the crowd, the older ones with memories like braided rope, looked up and nodded, as if greeting an old friend who had taken a long road and finally come home. If you stood on the harbor wall and watched the lights, you could feel a story rising under your feet. It had the shape of a road that curled north. It had the shape of a river that remembers everything you whisper to it. It had the shape of a mountain that wears a crown only when the moon is right. The people of the fjord did not know all of this. Not yet. They only knew they slept very well that night. They only knew they belonged. And somewhere beyond the last bend of the fjord, in a forest that kept its own careful counsel, the first quiet footsteps of the spirits passed through the moss and did not leave a mark. They had heard, they were listening, they were pleased. The founding was complete, the listening had only begun. Chapter 3. The Spirits of Ice and Sky. There is a way the north speaks when it prefers to be almost silent. A flutter of light where there is no flame. A drop in the air that is not cold enough to make you shiver, only calm enough to make your shoulders remember how to lower. A feeling that the path you are on has walked you as much as you have walked it. The people of the fjord learn that language slowly, as one learns a song by standing in the room where it is being sung. They heard first of the spirits from travelers who arrived with boots white at the seams. The travelers spoke carefully. They said that some things go better without names. They also said that kindness is a kind of name that the world always answers to. Around the longhouse fire, they told of shapes in the woods that were not shadows and not animals, yet had the patience of both. They told of stones that breathed when the moon was low. They told of a horse made of water that had never lost a race, because it ran inside the wave itself. They told of a wind that liked to play, and of a fire that liked to be small when children were near. The elders of the hills nodded when they heard these stories, although they did not call them stories. They called them memories. The spirits were not new. They were old enough to have seen the first stars lift their faces from the lake and ask what they were supposed to do. The spirits were not far away. They were as near as the breath that fogs a window and then disappears. On a night when the aurora gathered itself into a thin ribbon and tied a bow near the top of the sky, a small group from the fjord followed a path into the trees. They did not go as explorers. They went as listeners. The path was not marked, and yet it was there. You can tell a true path by how it leaves the grass behind it still green. They found a clearing with a ring of standing stones. Each stone had a face when you looked at it long enough, and then the face was gone when you blinked. The stones were not showing off. They were being polite, the way a host sometimes steps forward and then back. In the center of the clearing, the moss had a brightness as if someone had whispered good news to it, and it was trying to decide how to feel. They waited. Waiting is a form of speech in the north. When you wait, you are saying, I am not the only important thing here. They waited long enough to hear their own breathing become part of the wind. In time, the wind lifted slightly. Leaves trembled without hurrying. The shadows at the base of the stones shifted and then settled as if someone had moved from one chair to another. It was not a show. It was a hello. The first to be felt was the spirit of the air. It did not make itself a shape. It found the soft hairs on the back of each person's neck and smoothed them. It tugged gently at a braid and then lay the braid back where it had been. It rang a small silver bell in the ear that was not there at all, and yet everyone turned a little to see. Welcome, the wind said without saying. Welcome as you are. Do not put on a different voice for us. We have already learned your true one. A breath later, the fire spoke. Not loudly, not as flame. A warmth passed from stone to stone, the kind of warmth you feel through a wooden bench in late summer after the sun has left it. The warmth found fingers and reminded them of kettles and bread. It found shoulders and reminded them of a childhood blanket and a nap that had never been finished. The warmth said, "We are small and we are enough. We are not here to burn. We are here to keep." Earth arrived as patience, a weight, but not a burden. The kind of weight you feel when someone strong and kind sits on the other side of a seesaw. The stones grew steadier, the ground lifted by the width of an eyelash to meet the soles of their boots. A quiet moved over the clearing that was so deep and kind that one of the listeners forgot to be a grown-up for a moment and let her knees bend and sit. She did not fall. The earth had been ready for that since morning. Last of the four. Water entered, not with a rush, but with a memory. Each person felt the clean taste the first time they ever drank from a cold cup on a warm day. Their mouths remembered water in their own way, the sound of a brook under ice, the sound of rain on wood, the sound of a wave that chooses to set itself down carefully instead of breaking. The water said, "We keep and we move. We are home and we are the road. We are a story and we are the page it is written on." The four were not alone. They were excellent company, but they were not alone. As the people listened, a cooler, older feeling braided itself through the air. It was the taste of snow that has decided to fall before the world has decided that it is winter. It was the kind of cool that makes the inside of the nose feel as if it can hold a song. It was the absence of hurry, the presence of clarity, the shape of silence when silence is doing its best work. This was the spirit that was not simply one of the four, and yet belonged with them. This was the listening cold, the compassion of frost, the bright attention of ice. It is easy to think of ice as the end of a thing, the stopping, the closing. It is also easy to think of ice as only a mirror, a surface, a pause. The people in the clearing understood something else. The ice here was a keeper. It kept the shine of the stars when the lake wished to sleep. It kept the footprints of the fox a little longer than the fox meant to leave them. It kept the shape of a single snowflake on the shoulder of a coat until a child could lean close and learn it by heart. This keeping was not an order. It was a gift, a promise to hold without taking. One of the elders, who wore a coat with a collar that looked like a small cloud, stepped forward and spoke in a voice that had learned how to respect quiet. "We bring you nothing that you do not already have," she said. "We bring you our attention. We bring you our kindness. We bring you our wish to belong to this place without asking it to become us." The stones said nothing and were pleased. The wind lifted the edge of the elder's sleeve and let it fall again. The fire purred into the moss and was careful. The earth held the small bones of a field mouse the way a pocket holds a pebble. The water turned the underside of the leaves into mirrors for a single blink. It is said that on that night a thin path of snow appeared between the stones, 1 flake wide, then 2, then 5. A pale ribbon laid down by a hand that enjoyed making lines. The ribbon did not move. It simply was. A child reached out and touched it and drew her finger back quickly and laughed. "That was not cold," she said, surprised. "That was happy." The elders nodded because sometimes children arrive at the center of a truth faster than anyone else. From that night forward, Arendelle, which was already Arendelle in its heart even if the map had not officially learned it yet, lived with a deeper courtesy. The fisher who set his nets left a slice of water empty. The woodcutter took from the forest and then took a little less. The baker brushed the flour from his sill and also brushed a small white line on the edge of the window for the wind to read as a greeting. The keeper of the peace stood before the stones at the start of each season and listened long enough for the quiet to answer. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it did not. She thanked it either way. Stories thickened in the air like stew. Some said that the earth spirits, heavy as sleep, walked at dusk with feet that did not hurry, and that moss grew in the shape of their heels. Some said that foxes and ptarmigans and elk had learned a way to nod at the wind, as if nodding at a cousin. Some said that a horse of water ran under the skin of the fjord and loved to race boats, always letting the smallest boat win if the child in it laughed. A night arrived when the sky turned the color of old lilacs. The northern lights curved and curled, and then held very still, which is not their favorite thing to do. The people made a circle by the harbor, all ages, all coats, all hats, all quiet. An elder began to sing, a melody so simple that you could sing along even if you had never heard it before. The song was a path for memories. It was a small, sweet boat in a very wide river. It did not need to be clever. It needed to be kind. It was. As the song moved through the circle, eyes softened. There were tears, some and not many. There were smiles, many and not loud. A grandparent pointed to the ridge and told the inward story of a winter when the trees cracked like cups in the cold and the bread had to be shared thinner, and how a stranger with a red scarf had appeared with a sack of apples that tasted like the sun, and how after that the red scarf was always remembered each time a new scarf was knit. The spirits listened. You can tell when they do. The snow does not fall any faster. It falls more true. When the song ended, the silence that followed was as full as a basket. The basket was placed gently on the mantle of the night. No one moved for a time. A child yawned. The yawn was caught by 3 other children, and then by a dog, and then by a father who pretended he had not yawned at all. The water smiled, which is to say, a small ripple made a happy sound against the dock. Not every sign was gentle. Once a wind came with a chest full of toys and forgot to play nicely. The roof of the gathering hall lost 3 shingles. The dock learned to bow lower than usual. The people stood in their doorways and watched, and did not shake their fists. When the wind tired and lay down on the mountain, they fixed the shingles and the dock, and spoke quietly of the way big things sometimes forget their size. Another time, the fire in a cottage was too eager. It climbed into the rafters to see what the world looked like from there. The neighbors brought water in pails and blankets, and more water and more blankets. Then the rain remembered its job and came to help. When it was finished, the house was a little smaller, and the family was a little wetter, and the village was a little more certain that a place is a person made of many people. A pot of stew found its way to the doorstep without anyone seeing who carried it. A child fell asleep in her father's boots. The boots made excellent pillows. The elders spoke more openly now about the river, the one in the far north that remembers things. They called it Artohalan. They said the name with such an ease that it felt like a lullaby, even when it was not sung. They told that Artohalan did not flow like other rivers, that it held within its body the clear shapes of old truths, and that if you went there with a loud heart, you would hear nothing. But if you went there with a listening heart, the river would place in your hands a memory that you had forgotten you needed. Not every memory is warm. Not every memory is easy. But a place that keeps its memories is a place that keeps its way. Sometimes at night, a small private snowfall visited only the castle green. It arrived delicate as flour sifted from a mother's hand, and it lay down for a minute, and then left no trace. The guards pretended not to notice. The cooks pretended not to brush it from their shoulders with fondness. The house linens learned the smell of quiet snow. The banisters learned how to be politely slippery, just a little. The candle flames grew taller for a moment, as if to see better, then dipped back down as if satisfied. A traveler from the forest tribes who moved with the grace of someone who had never once wanted to step harder than the ground could bear, came to the hall one winter evening and spoke in a way that felt like a story spoken by a hand, not a mouth. "We have long lived with the spirits," she said. "We have learned to look with our listening, and to listen with our looking. We do not ask for gifts, because being here is the gift. We do not claim power, because belonging is stronger. But sometimes a place and a people make between them a child who can hold a special shape of the north in her palms and not be bruised by it. This is not the same as being chosen. It is the same as being fit for a task that was waiting for a good pair of hands." The hall did not echo when she finished. It absorbed her words and kept them warm, the way pocket fabric warms a stone. The keeper of the peace nodded slowly. The people did not say, "Who will the child be?" They did not say, "When will she come?" They put an extra blanket on the shelf, and they made a shelf for it to sit upon. That is a fine way to prepare for a thing you cannot predict. You set out kindness, and you wait. In those days, the seasons behaved with careful beauty. Winter arrived like a quiet guest. Spring opened like a letter written by a cousin you have always loved. Summer slowed its feet the closer it came to the water, understanding that the fjord preferred soft voices. Autumn draped the mountain in copper and bronze and gold, and then lit a candle in every birch leaf. The spirits walked and floated and curled and rested within it all. They were not above the people and not below them. They were beside them, the way a hand is beside another hand when it is time to cross a road. One evening a flock of geese lifted from the marsh, as if the marsh had been teaching them how to rise. Their bodies flashed pale against the blue. Their calls were soft and sure. As they turned, their wings cut the air into a clean, careful lace that you could almost see. Under their path, the fjord made a thin, bright line, and in that line there was a reflection of the northern lights that had not yet appeared. It was a promise, and it was kept. Later that night, the first green ribbon arrived and wrote its single beautiful sentence across the sky, and then dozed. The people of Arendelle sang more often toward the north now. Sometimes the song was a melody with words. Often it was simply how they moved their hands. You can sing by mending. You can sing by setting bread on a window ledge to let the air taste it. You can sing by opening a door and then closing it quietly when you leave. The spirits answered with small, perfect things. A dandelion in the snow, a water drop on a pine needle that held the whole fjord upside down and then let it go. A breeze that stayed exactly the right length to lift a child's kite once and then return it to her so she could carry it home without tears. And in the quiet of one especially tender night, when the moon had set itself like a pearl in a dark bowl, an idea passed through the kingdom as gently as a hand through silk. It did not belong to anyone. It belonged to the place and to whatever patient love was waiting for a shape to arrive. The idea was this: that one day a girl would be born who could lace her fingers and hold in them the full kindness of winter, not the bite, not the break, the kindness. The idea was not a declaration. It was not a trumpeting. It was the folding of a blanket. It was the setting of a cup on a table beside a chair that was still empty. It was the keeping of a space. No one raced to prepare. No one wrote a law. The elders only smiled at one another, and then looked up at the ridge, and then down to the water, and then let the idea do its quiet work. That is how ideas ripen in good places, on their own time, with their own breath. The spirits knew, they always do. Wind ran gentle hands over the corners of the castle roof until the roof learned the tune. Fire learned to enjoy the smallness of a hearth and not ask for more. Earth deepened the pockets where roots liked to rest. Water polished the stones along the shore until they felt like promises. A child in the village asked her mother if the Northern Lights had a grandmother. The mother said perhaps, and the grandmother said of course, and the lights that night wore an extra shawl of purple, because grandmothers are generous and have always had a very good sense of color. So it was that Arendelle did not simply wait for magic. It made room for it the way you make room for a friend expected at supper by setting an extra place a week early just to enjoy the sight of it waiting. The room itself was the invitation. The patience was the music. The kindness in the ordinary days was the spell. And somewhere above the fjord, where the air tastes a little like snow even in summer, the mountain kept its quiet watch. It listened for footsteps that had not yet learned to walk. It learned the names of stars that had not yet been born. It held the shape of a future palace in its strong old hands and smiled to itself the way stone smiles, slowly, over many winters. When the time came for the next chapter, it did not announce itself with thunder. It arrived like a snowflake that chooses the same spot on a window again and again, making not a frost, but a lace. It arrived like a laugh in a hallway that had learned to be quiet and was glad to learn something else. It arrived as the first winter of a first child in a royal bed. It arrived as the second child's warm laugh that startled the quiet into joy. It arrived as two sisters and a kingdom that loved them without asking them to be anything except themselves. But that is a soft door we will open in the next part of the night. For now let your breath slow with the fjord. Let your shoulders rest with the mountain. Let your thoughts settle like lanterns in a harbor, each one finding the place where it can float without moving. The spirits of ice and sky are patient. They keep watch with you. The world has folded your blankets. The candle in the window is steady. The snow knows your name in the language of kindness. Sleep comes like a gentle visitor, and the kingdom hums its low song. When you wake, we will walk into the years of the sisters, hand in hand with the dawn. Chapter 4. A royal line is born. Morning gold lifts over the fjord, slow and careful, the way a parent lifts a sleeping child so as not to wake them too soon. In that light, the first crest is drawn on a scrap of sailcloth. A simple line for the fjord, a strong triangle for the mountain, a star that could be a snowflake. The people gather not for spectacle, but for breakfast bread, fish, and the quiet ceremony of naming the shape of home. The cloth is pinned to a beam in the gathering hall, where the door catches it, where the air can read it and agree. A leader is chosen by listening more than speaking. She stands with her hands folded and lets the room settle. Her voice is gentle but carries the weight of the harbor stones. She promises what a place needs most from those who guide it. Keep the fires safe. Keep the markets fair. Keep the doors open. Keep the memories warm. She does not call herself queen. Not yet, not aloud. though the room understands that royalty begins with duty long before it puts on a crown. Years stack like neat cords of wood, work seasons, festival seasons, the slow stitch of a community making itself sure. New homes rise with small carved friezes along their lintels, swirls and stars, and the suggestion of the fjord's curve. Boats learn the bends and the shadows where the fish like to gather. Children find the best stones for skipping and the best trees for telling secrets to. The elders show the younger ones how to place their palms upon the earth and feel the humming patience underneath. On a winter morning that seems content to be ordinary, the elder steward climbs the hill above the harbor, carrying a small chest wrapped in wool. The chest is not heavy. Inside is a circlet of hammered river silver. It is smooth, undecorated, almost shy. The steward sets it on a flat stone and waits. The wind visits once, twice, then rests. The sun tips one coin of light into the circlet and lets it shine for a heartbeat. That is enough. The circlet is carried down again and set in the hall, not behind a lock, but beside a candle where anyone can see it and understand that power, to be true, must stay close to the light. The first investiture is more blessing than coronation. The leader stands beneath the crest and the banner and bows to the elders, then to the children, then to the fishermen and bakers and seamstresses, then to the travelers who have chosen to stay. When the circlet is placed upon her brow, it seems to like the warmth of her hair, to rest there as if it has at last found the right shelf. No trumpets sound. The fjord breathes once and sets a small wave upon the stones, and lets it rest there in a shining line. Traditions sprout like crocuses. Old songs are given new harmonies. A winter solstice candle walk begins with one flame in a window on the eastern street. One by one, as the flame is shared, every window glows. From the water, the town looks like a quiet constellation. From the hill, it looks like a small cluster of stars that has forgotten the sky and is delighted to be among kitchens and cradles. The keepers of the crest stitch tiny snow star patterns on shawls to be loaned to anyone who comes without one. No one is cold on solstice night. Even the air puts on a little warmth out of courtesy. The palace is not a palace yet, not stone, not towers. It is a larger house with a long eave and a courtyard where pine needles gather like small green boats. A library begins because someone puts all the best stories on a single shelf, then adds another shelf, then adds a table for writing new stories that are not yet sure what they want to be. The room smells of ink and the sea and wool that has come in from the cold. A window opens toward the mountain and admits the snow when it wishes to arrive as a visitor, not a storm. The royal line is not a straight line. It is a braid, a strand of caution, a strand of courage, a strand of curiosity winding together and then winding again when the next hands take up the work. Some rulers prefer early mornings and the sound of oarlocks. Some prefer late nights and the soft measuring of ledgers. Some are very good at making a stew for 100. Some are very good at listening to a single child. All are good at apologizing when they forget that a kingdom is a conversation. There is a room kept for mending, not only clothing, promises, misunderstandings, hurt feelings that have learned to sit with their knees tucked up. In that room there is a rocking chair that takes the weight of sorrow without complaint, and a tin of buttons no garment truly needs, but many stories do. The royal hands learn needle and thread there, and the royal ears learn how to wait for the last sentence of a long explanation before they answer. The first crest carved in oak is raised above the great door. The mountain wears a crown of small chisels. The fjord line is smooth as a lullaby. The star sings a tiny wooden note when the wind comes from the north. Children are lifted up one by one to touch the carving for luck. Later, when they are grown, their fingers remember the feel of that line, as if it were a path they walked in their sleep. Arendelle begins to welcome ships from farther shores, sails of different shapes, languages that carry their own weather, spices that turn soup into stories. The docks become a polite argument between boots and boards. The royal ledger learns to make space for olive oil and indigo. The harbor master learns to say good morning in 4 ways and good night in 5, then grins and uses the smile that works in every tongue. With trade comes talk, and with talk come questions, and with questions comes the kind of growth that happens in the mind and travels to the hands. The royal gardens are planted not for display, but for usefulness and delight. Lavender for calm, thyme for courage, rowan for protection, a willow whose branches touch the water and tell its secrets in summer. Children practice bows under the willow because it feels like a quiet friend. The gardener keeps a little basket by the gate with twine, scissors, and extra patience. Patience is used often. It grows back by morning. A hall of maps opens next to the library. Maps are made of paper and ink and scale, but here they are also made of breath and memory. A map of the fjord with careful depth lines. A map of the ridge with the names children have given to certain trees. A map that shows where the best berries hide after the first frost. A map that marks the 4 winds and where to stand in the square to feel each one most clearly. A map that is only a white page with 1 silver dot labeled, "Sometimes there is just snow." The keeper of maps teaches anyone who asks how to draw their own. The first lesson is to look. The second is to look longer. A winter arrives that loves detail. Frost prints tiny ferns on every window. The ice along the river builds itself into lace that looks like a grandmother's handkerchief laid upon a mirror. The royal smith, who can make a nail as beautiful as a crown, gives a day to crafting small lantern hooks shaped like leaves. When the lanterns are hung, the entire market looks as if the evening itself has chosen to wear jewelry. There are disagreements. There must be, for a living place requires many minds, and many minds make music by finding harmony after a small, honest clash. Where to place the new net sheds, how to set the market stalls when the wind comes from the west, whether to allow goats in the square on washing day. The royal line is not above the talk. They are inside it, not to win, but to serve the best answer they can find. When the answer fails, they come back the next morning and try again, and the trying again is the warmth that carries a town through winter. The first royal ship is christened with river water and tea and 1 bell that used to hang in the school. She sails out with flour, wool, carved combs, and letters folded into each crate, letters to anyone who might hold them first. The letters say, "We are here. If you ever sail this way, we will make room." The ship returns with books, iron, a jar of honey that tastes like a hill covered in flowers, and a small instrument that laughs when you pluck it. For the royal line, the night is as important as the morning. There is a bell rung at dusk that calls the castle to a hush, not silence, a hush. You can move inside it without breaking it. The bell is rung by whoever needs the hush most that day. Sometimes a tired steward, sometimes a child who has learned something new and would like the castle to be soft while they hold it. Sometimes a queen who has been very brave for many hours and now wishes to be brave at being gentle. In time, the title queen comes to be used more often. Not heavy, steady. It means the one who remembers what the place is for. When a new queen takes the circlet, she places her hand first upon the old oak crest and then upon her own heart, so that the wood can listen to the beat and keep it. She makes a vow she has memorized but never rehearsed, because it is not a performance. It is a promise. The people answer not with cheers, but with a soft wave of breath, a tide of yes that moves through the square and touches every door. Underneath everything, the spirits remain near. The earth under the palace stones keeps its slow, kind count. The air finds its way into corridors and rescues a curtain from too much stillness. The fire practices being small and happy. The water remembers every reflection it has held and offers them back to the night when the moon asks. The ice learns the steps to the dances it will someday teach in the square. It waits. It does not grow impatient. It belongs. The royal nursery looks toward the mountain. The windows are low so that little faces can find the snow and say hello. There are carved toys that have learned the sound of laughter and kept it. There is a shelf of folded blankets that smell like sun and soap, and the kind of love that wakes in the night and does not complain. In that room, in that long beginning, the line learns again what it has always known. A kingdom is a cradle for memories and work and rest. A queen is a keeper of kindness. A crest is a picture of a promise. A mountain is a steady friend. A fjord is a page upon which the moon writes a quiet story every night. On a certain evening, the aurora bows low and slides a ribbon of green behind the ridge. The queen watches from the balcony, hand on the stone, face turned up the way flowers do. She feels the old hush, the listening hush, the one that visits before something begins. She does not know exactly what. She does not need to. It is the feeling of a door that will someday open and let in a child whose hands can hold winter without breaking it. The royal line is ready, not with speeches, but with small, everyday promises. Warm milk, clear paths, a place to learn to be exactly who you are, and not a whisper more. That is how a crown prepares for the kind of magic that chooses kindness first. The night sighs, pleased. The stars add one more pinprick. The fjord holds it gently. The crest over the door in the candlelight seems for a moment to move. Not much, only enough to look like it has taken a breath. The story turns a page, careful not to wake anyone who has already fallen asleep, and the first line of the next chapter gleams pale as frost. Chapter 5. The Night of Shimmering Frost. It begins, as it often does in Arendelle, with the sky deciding to be tender. A thin veil of clouds lit from nowhere you can point to. The kind of evening when every sound seems to put on soft shoes. Bells walk carefully. Doors whisper instead of click. Even laughter discovers a low, warm register and stays there like a kettle simmering without hurry. Children are allowed to stay up past the second candle, not for a festival, for a feeling. Elders trust feelings in Arendelle. When the air carries a hush, you make a chair for it and sit beside it and see what it wants to say. People gather along the harbor wall, shawls pulled close, hands folded, eyes lifted in that unspoken way that means we will not force anything to happen, and we will not miss it when it does. Lanterns are hung low so the sky can have the high part of the scene. Snow rests in the eaves, content to be ornament and not command. The water of the fjord looks like someone has smoothed it with the palm of a hand and said, "There, that is better." The first light appears where there is no lamp. A grain of silver above the ridge, not a star, not a planet, something closer. It widens into a thread, then into a thin ribbon, then into a shining path that seems to lie along the edge of the air. People do not gasp, they sigh. You can hear 10 versions of the word "oh," none of them spoken out loud. Frost arrives without a cloud, as if woven from the sound the ribbon makes. It begins on the harbor stones, a fine white lace that does not bite. It curls up the legs of the lampstands and draws vines no vine has learned yet. It sketches ferns that never grew in this climate, and bows to each one when it is finished. It reaches the windows and becomes a scribe. It writes long, slow lines along the glass, pauses, considers, then writes a little more, as if remembering a story that must be told gently so it does not wake old sorrows. Under every drawn fern and every drawn vine, there is a tiny shimmer, a heartbeat the eye almost misses. People lean closer and then remember to breathe on the glass to see if the frost will blur and reform. It does. It enjoys the game. Children laugh and draw their names with their breath. The names vanish and are kept anyway. Names always are. Somewhere. Up on the hill, the circle of stones receives a dusting that does not gather anywhere else. The frost finds the edges and brightens them until each standing stone looks like a candle made of time. Between them the air becomes visible, which is rare and polite and a little mysterious. It looks like clear silk laid over the night. The northern lights, not to be upstaged and not inclined to compete, arrive as guests. They dress in their quiet colors, hints of green, a slip of blue, a memory of purple. They do not sway much. They prefer tonight to be about stillness. They lay themselves along the dark and hold their pose like dancers, trusting the softness of the floorboards. The frost continues its handwriting across the town. It finds the oak crest and picks out the mountain with a steady white line. It gives the fjord a mirror edge. It makes the small star in the carving glow without flame. It lays a tulip on the baker's door, and a set of tiny boats on the oar-maker's window, and a feather on the hatter's glass that is so real, a blackbird lands beside it and considers whether it could be carried away. People feel at once that this is not a warning, not a test. It is a blessing. Not a blessing that tells you everything will be easy, but a blessing that promises that even in the difficult there will be beauty, and even in the cold there will be care. Some blessings are loud and arrive with drums. This one arrives with the gentle insistence of lace being tugged across the city, patient, precise, sure. At the palace, lamps are lowered and curtains opened. The queen stands with the circlet in her hand, not upon her head, holding it as you hold a bowl when you expect a friend to offer fruit. The frost traces the balcony stone and lays a narrow path as if inviting bare feet to try a single step. The queen smiles and places the circlet on the railing for a moment, and the metal takes on a pale shine as if it is learning a new word. When she lifts it again, it is warmer than before. Down by the water, fishermen who have read the weather all their lives see nothing to fear. Nets are left as they are. Boats rock once, twice, then settle as if the harbor has tucked them in. The harbor master lets his ledger stay closed. Even ink prefers nights like this to be written upon the heart and not the page. There are whispers, not the kind people make, the kind a place makes. The frost writes its letters, and the air reads them, and the water murmurs the clearest lines back to the stones. Children hear a phrase and keep it in their pockets without understanding. Elders hear a promise and look up toward the ridge with a tenderness that makes their eyes shine. The phrase is simple, not a proclamation, a lullaby line. A child will come who listens like winter and loves like spring. The words settle upon the town like a shawl. No one repeats them aloud. The repeating happens in the breath and in the holding of hands, and in the way the doors stay unlatched just a little later than usual. In the north, far beyond the ridge and the next ridge, a river that remembers everything lifts a thin voice to the sky. It is not music, and it is not speech. It is the sound ice makes when it is writing. The river writes a single clear shape in its depths and holds it. The shape is not a face. Not yet. It is a pattern snow likes to fall in. It is the way light would look if it could be woven. The frost finishes its visit without hurry. It returns to the stones and the glass, and the carved crest, and the willow buds, and the small boat hooks. It offers a last delicate touch, a comma at the end of a soft sentence. The northern lights fold themselves and slide back into the dark. The harbor takes back its sheen and becomes practical again. Breath deepens. Shawls are pulled tight and then loosed and then tied again. Someone begins a lullaby in the square. Another voice joins, then another, until the song is part of the night, and the night is part of the song. No footprints remain in the morning where the frost walked. Only the memory of a cleaner air, of windows that had whole gardens upon them, of stone that glowed as if it had held a small sun in its hands. Only the certainty that something kind has passed through and made a promise without asking anything in return. Inside the palace, the queen sets the circlet beside her bed and sleeps more easily than she has slept in months. In dreams, she sees two small pairs of shoes beside a fire. One pair is careful, one pair is delighted. Both pairs are warm. From that night forward, there is a small bowl kept on the nursery windowsill. It is filled with pure water, changed each morning as the sun lifts itself over the ridge. The bowl is for the sky to see itself in, and for the frost to taste when it wishes, and for the child to one day place her fingers in and learn what clarity feels like. People go about their days because days need doing, but every so often a glance turns toward the ridge, toward the path where the frost made its first line, and the glance is not a question. It is a greeting to a future that has already left its soft footprint in the present. Winter is kind that year. It is crisp, not cruel. The market breathes happily. The lamps last longer. Bread rises more willingly. Babies sleep with their hands in loose fists that look like small stars at rest. The night of shimmering frost has given the town a rhythm to remember, and it plays under everything like a drum you do not need to strike to feel. The elders mark the night on the calendar with a small silver leaf. Not a holiday, a hush day. When it comes around each year, everyone looks up at once without being told. And the sky, even if it is cloudy, feels seen. Sometimes the frost returns in the same way. Sometimes it does not. A promise does not need to repeat itself to remain true. And in the more northern north, at the lip of the river of memory, a lullaby finds its full melody. It waits at the edge of the world where stories drink, and it hums to itself and grows clear. It is a lullaby for two, though no one has sung the second harmony yet. Arendelle sleeps easily, lamps dim, doors latched softly, hearts warm. The palace nursery is readied with a patience that does not count days, only makes comfort. The bowl sees the moon and keeps the reflection as long as it is asked. Snow, when it comes, falls with the manners of a guest who appreciates good company. When the next chapter begins, it will begin with laughter echoing down a hall where a closed door will open wide. It will begin with small hands learning to greet snowflakes by name. It will begin with a family that is also a kingdom, and a kingdom that remembers always to be a family. The night of shimmering frost rests in the past, the way a hand rests upon a book that will be opened again, not to turn the same page, but to feel the same warmth. Chapter 6. Sisters of the North Mountain. Morning breaks in pale peach and clean blue. A bell speaks softly once, and then is quiet, as if to say, "This is a day that will not need reminding." In the nursery, a curtain lifts just enough to let the room breathe. The bowl on the sill holds a thin, bright line of sky. A sparrow hops on the outer ledge and nods as if it knows something and approves. The first cry is not loud. It is determined. It sounds like a tiny river asking for its bed. The queen holds her child and looks out toward the mountain and feels the familiar hush settle again. The one from the night of shimmering frost, only warmer now, as if the hush has found the right lap to sit upon. The baby's eyes flicker open with the seriousness of a listener, then soften into the comfort of a sleeper. Outside, snow that is not snow, light as breath, falls for a few minutes and then decides it has said enough. She is given a name that sits well upon the tongue and wears winter like a necklace. The first days are a bundle of small things done well. Warm cloth, slow milk, the learning of the sounds the child makes when dreams are sweet and when they need smoothing. The palace walks more softly than usual. The fjord holds its reflections a little longer, because a new face has come to see itself there, and the water is proud. People greet the news in the way Arendelle has learned to greet everything, with work made lighter, with bread shared faster, with songs hummed in doorways that have seen many seasons and are ready for many more. A shawl is hung on the oak crest for one day, blue with a thread of silver through it, so that anyone passing can touch it and feel the good change the kingdom is holding. The queen, at night, holds her daughter and walks the corridor that looks toward the north. Snow prowls the mountain in a friendly way. The little fingers curl and uncurl. Sometimes the air seems to stand up and lean in, polite and pleased and very careful. The lamps do not flicker when it happens. They steady, as if to say, "We can be calm, everyone. We have candles enough." As weeks become months, small signs visit. A tiny spark of frost at the edge of the bowl on a summer afternoon, gone by the time a nurse turns her head. A spider web jeweled at dawn in a pattern so intricate the gardener forgets to speak for a moment. The child's breath puffing into a clear little cloud on a morning that should not carry cold. Nothing sharp, nothing that bites. The kind of winter kindness promised by the shimmering frost, the kind that keeps the world bright without asking it to be hard. She grows into a watcher. She notices the corners of rooms and the edges of shadows. She is careful with toys and careful with words, saying them in her head many times before letting them go into the air. She touches glass with the back of her hand, not her palm, and someone who sees this and knows to love her for it smiles. Her laughter is rare but precise. When it arrives, it lands exactly where it is needed and warms the room like the first coal in a winter grate. Seasons turn a page, and another cry enters the palace, this one like bell chimes scattering. The second child takes the air as a dance floor. She kicks the blankets off twice, and then conspiratorially agrees to keep them if a song is sung. She finds faces with her eyes the way a bird finds the one tree it loves best. She rests with ease and wakes in delight. If the first child is a winter window, clear and bright, the second is a summer doorway, open and laughing. Their names live side by side upon the lips of the kingdom. The market women say them while weighing plums. The sailors say them while checking lines. The school children say them when lining up, proud because their letters are very good today. The sisters are spoken of as a pair the way a door is spoken of with its frame. Each makes the other more itself. The nursery is 2 songs now, quiet and quick, a hush and a giggle. The room learns to hold both. The rocking chair rocks and then stands still and then rocks again. The bowl on the sill learns to catch 2 different kinds of sky and to be equally proud of both. Some afternoons are long strings of dominoes toppled by laughter. The younger sister learns early to convince grown-ups that everything is a game, and then proves it. Chase becomes a poem. Peekaboo becomes a philosophy. Hide and seek becomes a way of understanding the world. The older sister participates, a little apart and yet thoroughly present, as if she were mapping the game as it unfolds and writing a careful guide for anyone who will play later. On certain mornings, when the sun is shy and the corridor floors are very clean, a thin frost appears at ankle height, so slight that it feels like walking through lace. It evaporates when you notice it, as if embarrassed to be seen. The nurse laughs and says, "This castle loves its little surprises." The older sister reaches out her fingers and then places them behind her back and only watches. Watching is a form of love for her. It is how she says yes without using a word. The seasons keep their promises. Spring arrives with young leaves that look like tiny hands. Summer spreads cloths on the grass and invites everyone to sit. Autumn puts amber in the light and cinnamon in the kitchens. Winter shows the first sister a kind of respect that astonishes even the elders, for the snow seems to fall more beautifully when she looks up into it. Each flake does its best work. Each shape keeps its angles, as if hoping to be remembered. There is a morning when the nursery becomes a snowfall, not a blizzard, not a storm. The sisters wake to flurries that ask to be friends. Some are real. Some seem to be real because joy can make ideas visible. The younger sister claps and the older smiles with her eyes and then, forgetting her carefulness for a moment, lifts her hands and the snowfall answers. Thicker now, brighter now, like a chorus that has been waiting for the conductor to nod. The flurry follows them to the great hall where the sunlight is a polite guest. The floor becomes a small skating pond, smooth and promising. The younger sister shrieks in delight and runs and slips and manages miraculously to land in a pile of pillows gathered by a steward who has known children very well. The older skates a little without meaning to, hands out, eyes wide, laughter held back by a ribbon of responsibility that she tries never to untie. The queen appears, and her face is a book full of love notes. The king appears, and his laugh is a bell in a warm tower. They play, how could they not? Snow becomes shapes, shapes become games, snowballs carefully made and more carefully tossed. A tiny snowman with a crooked smile offered as a gift to the head cook, who pretends to be surprised and is, in fact, delighted. The younger sister sings to the snow as if it were a choir of small white birds. The older sister listens as if she hears the exact note where snow becomes song. There is a moment, as there often is in bright mornings, when the world leans a little too far toward joy and forgets that bodies are soft. A slip, a quick slide, a small, scared sound. The older sister reaches with hands that have learned a bit more of winter than anyone else's hands. Reaches not to push away, but to cushion, not to stop, but to soften. Light answers her, a curve of cold light that bends, a pillow of frost that rushes to be kind. And then everything is too quiet. The younger child lies still, only for a breath, only for a second longer than play would ask. The frost that meant to protect has startled everyone instead. The older sister's eyes fill with a fear much larger than she is. She feels not the pride of doing a new thing, but the sharp, sudden ache of having done too much of it by accident. The queen is at the child's side in the time between two heartbeats. The king is there in the next heartbeat. A nurse is already opening windows to the morning air, not because air can fix everything, but because air is a friend that comes when asked. What happens next happens with the speed of love and the care of long practice. The child breathes, stirs, frowns, reaches for her mother, settles. The father speaks low to the older sister. His voice is not alarm. It is anchor. In that voice is the old story of the spirits, the friendship with the earth, the respect for the wind, the patience for the fire, the trust in the water. "We will listen now," he says. "We will go to where listening is strongest." The sled waits almost before it is called for. The path to the valley where the living stones teach is clear even in snow, even without snow. The mountain knows the way. The older sister rides wrapped in a blanket that smells like summer linen. Her hands are inside the blanket. She has put them there on her own. She watches the trees. The younger sister is held against her mother's chest, a small, warm star. The father rides with a hand on both of them, one eye on the path, one eye on the shape of the future that he will carry, whatever it looks like, with his whole strength. The valley is a cradle you can walk into. Stones that are not only stones stand where they have always stood and where they have always been ready to stand again. Their faces are the work of time and water and patience. They prefer to speak by looking. They prefer to listen by holding silence open long enough for someone to climb into it and rest. The queen steps forward. Her words are simple. Help us listen. The stone elders regard the sisters with the affection old things feel for new things they have been waiting for. A murmur passes through the valley that is not worry. It is recognition. One of the elders, whose eyes seem to have learned starlight when starlight was still an experiment, lowers his head a little and moves closer to the older child. There is no scolding in the valley. There is no fear offered back to fear. The elder looks into the older sister's careful heart and sees the kindness there, the wish to keep, the wish to be gentle, the fright at having made a mistake. He speaks so that both sisters can hear, even though one sleeps and the other has decided not to cry for reasons she cannot yet explain. He speaks so that the parents can breathe, which they do, deeper now. He speaks so that the mountain can carry the sound up and repeat it to the sky at dusk. "We will help," the elder says. "We will move what is too heavy for you to carry now. We will set the weight in a place where it can become light. The gift you hold is not a weapon. It is not a storm. It is a way of caring, but it must learn how to care for you too. The learning is slow, like winter. We will make it slow. We will make a path that is gentle. We will keep the bright parts safe until the time when your hands and your heart are strong enough to hold them without fear." A soft light gathers, the kind that seems to come from under your feet, from inside your ribs, from behind your eyes. It flows around the sisters. It touches the younger child's hair and leaves a tiny thread of pale in it, not cold, not strange, a ribbon of memory that will always remind her she was loved when she was sleeping. It touches the older child's brow and removes from it the shape of the moment that hurt. Not the truth of the love, the sharpness of the fear, the memory that would make the gift look like danger instead of kindness. When it is done, the valley listens again. The mountain waits its turn and then sighs, audible and good. The water climbs over a stone and sets itself down now that it has seen what it needed to see. The wind moves a strand of the queen's hair and puts it back where it had been, which is how wind says, "You will be all right." The elder speaks one more sentence, not because more words are needed, but because words can be like hands on your shoulders, steadying. Love will be your lesson, he says. Love will be your shelter and your key. Keep it. Practice it. Let it grow in the light. And when the time comes for your hands to be what they were made to be, love will be the warmth that keeps winter kind. They return to the palace. The road seems shorter. The sky seems closer. The door seems to understand that now it holds something very tender and will do so well. The younger sister wakes in the courtyard and points at a pigeon and laughs in a way that makes everyone breathe properly for the first time in hours. The older sister walks beside her father, her fingers moving slightly as if playing a tiny song only she can hear. The song is careful. The song is gentle. The song is a promise she is making to herself. Days become small boats. They move across the water of time with steady strokes. Play resumes, altered but not broken. Snow visits mostly when called for, whether by the weather or by the patient lifting of a hand that asks without insisting. The younger sister is no less fearless, but she learns without knowing that rugs are friendly and pillows are wise, and that holding hands is a game that always wins. The queen learns to measure worry by usefulness and to set down what cannot help. The king learns the art of sitting on the floor with the sisters for as long as it takes for fear to become laughter. There is a new room added to the palace, a room for practice. It contains nothing that can break. It contains everything that can be learned. There is a wooden bench that enjoys being frosted and unfrosted. There are curtains that like to float and then sit still again. There is a window that opens a little and then a little more. There is a mirror that is not glass, only polished wood, so that faces can be seen without the worries of shattering. In that room, the older sister learns to feel a change come before it becomes more than she wants. She learns that breath is a bridge. She learns that stillness is a skill. The younger sister learns too. She learns to announce by laughter the moments when surprises are welcome, and to announce by a quiet hand, squeeze the moments when it is time to put the surprises away. She learns to be patient in a way that feels like a game, not a chore. She learns to cheer when practice goes well, and to cheer even louder when practice goes not so well, but the trying is brave. There are days that feel like a song sung exactly right. There are days that feel like a song sung in the wrong key, and then sung again until it finds its true home. No one keeps score. The palace keeps rhythm. Breakfast, lessons, play, practice, stories, lamps, lullaby. The mountain approves of rhythm. The fjord moves with it and calls it tide. Visitors come and are received with warmth and gently, with care for the space the family needs to spend on its learning. The kitchen sends out more soup. The staff take on extra steps. The queen bows with gratitude often. The king finds that the most royal thing he does some days is to carry his sleeping child from one room to another without waking her, and to stand in the doorway afterward and feel his heart behave like a bell struck very softly. The older sister, in quieter hours, stands by a window and traces shapes upon the glass with a finger that does not touch. Petals, stars, spirals. They appear in fog and vanish in clear. She does this not to accomplish something, but to feel the line between thought and world and to befriend it. The younger sister bursts into the room and announces a parade, and the line becomes confetti, and both girls laugh themselves a little breathless, which is a very good way to end an afternoon. A winter comes, deep and bright. The town makes paths between drifts that look like secret corridors to friendly caves. The palace square becomes a skating circle. The older sister moves with poise, feeling the long arc that ice prefers. The younger sister scoots and tumbles and pops up and thinks falling is hilarious. Sometimes the older one reaches a hand and offers balance. Sometimes the younger one reaches a hand and offers courage. Both offers are accepted gladly. There is, of course, a world waiting beyond the practice room, beyond the nursery path, beyond the palace walls. The corridor of childhood leads toward doors that open onto duties, choices, coronations, storms and clearings, departures and returns. The elders who remember the night of shimmering frost watch the sisters grow and see in them the beginnings of answers to questions that have not yet been asked. They say little. They tie ribbons into hair. They place extra biscuits on plates. They show the girls where the best view of the northern lights can be found when the trees are bare. One evening in the library, the sisters come upon the book that first told the lullaby of the river of memory. The older reads it aloud, careful and slow, music in her voice that no one taught her, that she simply found. The younger listens with her chin on the table and her feet swinging. When the last line is spoken, they sit very still for a long time, as if listening for the page to breathe. Perhaps it does. On the walk back to the nursery, the older sister glances at the window, and the window, with the politeness of an old friend, grows a thin white fern that looks exactly like the one in the picture they have just left. The younger sister sees it and squeezes her hand without a word. The older one exhales a long, slow ribbon of air that makes the fern blur, and then steady, and then blur again, and both of them smile because it feels like holding hands with the world. There will be more to learn. There will be days that ask a lot. There will be nights that return the asking with gentleness. For now, the sisters sleep in the room that looks toward the mountain. The bowl on the sill holds the moon again. The palace breathes. The kingdom keeps watch in the way a good friend does, not hovering, not blind, present and kind. Somewhere far to the north, the river that remembers keeps a space for two names. It holds them both and hums. The mountain in its slow, stony way hums along, a harmony you feel in your bones, not your ears. The fjord adds a quiet percussion, lap and hush, the drum of a safe harbor. The sisters of the North Mountain turn in their sleep and reach for each other as they have always done and will always do. One in careful curls of blanket, one in starfish sprawl. The night is so pleased it forgets to end on time and lingers a little longer outside their window. The morning waits at the door and smiles and says, "Take all the minutes you need. When it comes, when it opens, when it lets light in and calls birds to the sill, the day will be ordinary, and that will be its magic." Practice and play, bread and books. A new pattern on the practice room bench. A new joke told in the kitchen and repeated with gusto. A new tiny snowflake on the elder's sleeve that he pretends not to notice and treasures quietly anyway. The story will go on. It will lead where stories lead, through quiet and into echo, through echo and into quiet again. But for tonight, the line between the frost on the glass and the softness of two small breaths is the whole world, and it is enough. Chapter 7. Closed gates, silent halls. The morning after the visit to the valley of living stones does not blow horns or beat drums. It sets a soft hand upon the castle roof and says, "Quiet will help." The staff know what to do when quiet is needed. Footsteps shorten, voices lower. Doors that once swung free are guided to close, with a hand at the edge, so wood meets wood like cheek to cheek. The gates, which have loved the daily rhythm of opening and closing as the town comes and goes, hold still for a long time. No decree is shouted, no sign is painted in harsh letters. The gates simply learn a new habit. They open when they must, for bringing in flour and sending out letters, and they remain at rest the rest of the time. The hinges do not complain. A good hinge can hold its peace for years, if asked kindly. Within the castle, a new map is drawn, not on paper, but in the way people move. Some corridors are now for quiet practice and slow breath. Some rooms hold laughter at measured hours, and some keep their lamps dim even in the afternoon, so that the eyes can settle and the heart can work without hurry. The staff never whisper about secrets. They speak about space. They make space for the sisters to grow in safety. They make space for learning that likes to happen without witnesses. They make space for the day when the doors will open wide again. The elder sister learns gloves. She learns them not as a rule, but as a tool, the way a baker learns an apron and a sailor learns a knot. Cloth at the fingers helps the mind, the tutors say gently. Cloth gives the breath something to hold. She nods because she respects tools. She respects anything that helps her keep kindness from turning suddenly into surprise. She learns to put the gloves on as if she is tucking a bird back into its nest. She learns to take them off as if she is opening a storybook and does not wish to tear a page. The younger sister learns knocking. She knocks on the elder's door in rhythms that change with the seasons. 3 quick taps on spring mornings. A slow, thoughtful pattern on autumn nights. She does not always receive an answer. Sometimes she receives a song hummed on the other side, and that is a kind of answer. Sometimes she receives silence, and she sits with her back to the door in the hallway and tells jokes to the wood, because jokes should never feel left out. The queen and king carry 2 kinds of lanterns in their faces. One is steady light, the kind that shines at a harbor mouth and tells all who look that they can find their way home. The other is a lantern with shutters, used for tending delicate things. They angle this light carefully, so as not to brighten a room that wishes for dusk. They say yes where yes is strong. They say not yet where not yet is wise. They make paths that wind through the day like streams through a meadow, curving around the softer ground so no one sinks. There is a music to the closed castle. It is not silent. It is mindful. Down in the kitchens, pots breathe and pause as soup is coaxed into being. On the stairwells, dust motes learn to dance at a pace the eye can follow. In the library, pages turn slower, and the words grow thick like honey and stay on the tongue. The fire learns to tell small stories instead of large ones. Wood remembers where it came from and chooses to be patient. The elder sister practices in a room that has made itself safe. She watches the light that lives under her skin and the cold that answers the light, and the brightness that answers the cold. She learns how a thought becomes a gesture, becomes a change in the air. She learns to feel the change when it is the width of a thread, not the width of a scarf. She learns to stop not by clenching but by softening, not by fear but by form. Breath is the teacher. Breath is the bridge. Breath is the blanket spread under the tightrope. On certain afternoons, the queen sits by the practice room door and sews. She does not look up often. She does not need to. The sound of the needle is a kind of faith. In and out, pulling two edges together so they will be ready for wear. The elder sister hears the needle's rhythm and matches it. The cloth's calm says, "You are not the storm. You are the one who makes the stitching." The younger sister finds every way to be near without being in the way. She invents routes by which her laughter can arrive at the elder's door, wrapped in something small and safe. She slides notes under the crack at the bottom, not questions, because questions can be heavy. Observations. The baker made a loaf shaped like a cloud. The cat thinks the windowsill is a stage. Today the sun turned the snow on the hedge into sugar. When a reply comes, it is sometimes a drawing in the lightest pencil, a snowflake with 6 tidy arms, a fern like the ones the frost once wrote on the glass, or a star with one point slightly longer than the others, because perfection is less true than almost. Outside the castle, the town learns the new rhythm too. Market still open, net still dry on the stone wall. Lullabies are still hummed to children whose feet prefer to run even when they are told to sleep. But conversations turn a little inward, like flowers at dusk. The town displays less and cherishes more. It sets aside the part of itself that loves a parade and keeps in front the part that loves carrying a basket to a neighbor's doorstep and leaving it there with a ribbon and no note. Time returns each day as it always does, wearing the same coat and the same hat and the same friendly frown, as if to say, "I know you are busy, but I must keep moving." With time come lessons for both sisters that have nothing to do with halls and doors. The elder learns the weight of her name, how it sometimes fits like a warm shawl and sometimes like a new pair of shoes. The younger learns to make friends with the town through the cracks in the gates. She waves to the same fishermen every morning. She memorizes the faces of the market geese. She names the cats that patrol the rooftops like slow-moving stars. Winter is a different friend now. It arrives as if visiting an old friend who is ill and prefers quiet company. It sits at the window and watches the family play cards and nods when the elder's laughter warms the glass. It lies on the mountain like a blanket and tries not to shift. It does not press. It blesses. Snow falls mostly when asked and drifts away before it overstays. Sometimes the castle misses noise. That is honest. Halls made for echoing startle at the soft of it all. They remember the nights of dancing when shoes shone and lamps gleamed. They remember music bold enough to teach the stone how to hum. The castle keeps these memories the way cedar keeps the smell of a forest. It does not force them on the present. It holds them in a high cupboard until right day opens the door again. The closed gates teach the sisters a language they would never have learned otherwise. The elder learns the grammar of restraint, not the kind that pinches, the kind that curates. She discovers the joy of doing one thing at a time, the relief of smallness. The younger learns the vocabulary of delay. She discovers that someday can be kind if today is kind to it first. She learns the weight of a promise kept by being patient. Long seasons of this go by, not empty, not wasted, Useful the way winter is useful to a field. Roots move in the dark. Trees take strength when no one sees. The palace roots and the family roots and the town roots and the roots of the sisters' friendship with each other. This is not a season of parties. It is a season of faith. Still, a kingdom must eventually breathe outward. When the elder reaches the age at which the circlet no longer looks like a visitor in the palace but like a resident, the castle begins to prepare for a day that will ask it to be brave, not with loudness, but with exposure. Old covers are shaken and new banners cut. Docks sand their splinters into smoothness. The oak crest is polished until the mountain gleams, and the fjord line becomes a pale river. The gates do not tremble at the thought of opening. They do not roll their eyes as gates sometimes do when told to change their ways. They stand firm and imagine themselves swinging wide again and letting the town and the world meet under their steady arms. They practice in the night when no one is watching, opening the width of a breath and closing again, just to remember the hinges are still good. In the last days before the great morning, the elder walks the corridors she has known in quiet and greets them as if seeing them anew. The younger rehearses smiles in the mirror that are not for posing, but for welcoming. The queen and king count plates and napkins, and also blessings. The staff move like a school of fish, together without bumping. And the mountain, which has seen gates open and close through many winters, and knows neither to fear nor to celebrate change too loudly, looks down into the fjord and admires the way the water wears the sky. It thinks of two girls who learn to love each other through wood and whispers. It smiles a slow stone smile and waits for the day when the gates will turn their faces to the sun again. That day is coming. It steps softly over the ridge, bringing with it a sky that has learned every shade of blue. It brings a breeze that has practiced saying hello in 10 languages. It brings a bell rope that will be pulled and a crowd that will answer, and a pair of hearts that will feel both the weight they have trained for and the lift they have earned. The gates have been good friends to silence. Now they will be good friends to song. Chapter 8. A Coronation Under Summer Skies. The morning arrives dressed in a color that only coronations know. It is not just blue, it is the blue that makes white sails look like prayers. It is the blue that lets swallows draw cursive signatures over the roofs. It is the blue that gives even shadows a polished feel, as if they had been combed. At the first bell, the gates give a small shiver of delight and open with the grace of well-rested muscles. They do not creak. Someone oiled them after supper the night before with a care that felt like love. The town answers with laughter that has been waiting behind windows for years and is now allowed to step outside, wearing its best shoes. Stalls bloom in the square like a second summer. Ribbons make ladders for the light. Fresh bread comes out of ovens and teaches the air how to be kind. Boats crowd the harbor, but not rudely. Their masts are a polite conversation with the sky. Across the water, banners stretch between warehouses and sway as if they have private jokes. Children wear their grandparents' brooches. Dogs have their faces washed, which they pretend to dislike. Musicians warm their fingers and place the first notes like stepping stones on a shallow stream. Inside the castle, the elder sister stands in a room with 3 mirrors. The mirrors do not compete with one another. They offer different kinds of truth. One shows the face that the kingdom will see. One shows the face the family knows. One shows the face she keeps for herself, the private one where breath and hope speak in low voices and agree to carry one another. She lifts the circlet and feels its familiarity as much as its weight. It has rested upon the oak. It has rested upon her mother's hair. It has rested upon a cushion sewn from a robe that belonged to a queen who learned to love the sea. Now it will rest upon her. She remembers gloves and breath, and the narrow bridge between thought and world. She remembers the Valley Elder's sentence, the one that set the tone for everything. Love will be the warmth that keeps winter kind. She whispers this not as a spell, but as a promise she intends to keep even when promises are hard to hold. The younger sister spins in a gown that seems designed to applaud her. She claps, the gown claps, the window claps with its own light. She is a ribbon set free. She knows the whole castle by heart, and yet this morning it feels new at every corner. She runs errands no one asked for, then returns with things everyone needed. Pins for sleeves, water for a throat that forgot to drink, a joke just in time. The queen ties the final knot on a string of small bells that will be hung by the balcony where the wind likes to stop and breathe. The king checks lists with the calm of someone who trusts that lists are not the point. He steals a moment to stand with the elder at the window. No speeches are shared, only a look that says, "All we learned in quiet was for this, and when this is done, we will learn again." The procession to the hall is slow by design. The elder's steps are not grand, they are true. The floor stones remember the first leader who wore no crown and walked with hands open. The walls remember the hugs given and taken here. The tapestries remember the winters that asked for silence and received it. The elder carries these memories as if they are flowers. She places them silently upon the day ahead. The hall fills with faces the kingdom has missed. Neighbor towns, sea friends, hill cousins, travelers who once ate soup in the kitchen doorway and were told that soup is a passport here. There are even representatives of the forest people who speak well by listening. Their presence is a book opened to the right page. The coronation itself is a ceremony of breathing. Everyone inhales together when the circlet rises. Everyone exhales together when it rests upon her hair and chooses, as it has chosen before, to shine a little, not because it is gold, but because it is loved. Oaths are said simply, not cages, bridges. The elder's voice carries without force. It is a river voice, broad and patient, that welcomes tributaries and invites them to remember where they are going. Gloves come off at the moment written in the old schedule. No one speaks of this, but many feel their own fingers tingle as if greeting the air for the first time. In that instant, the elder remembers every quiet hour, every careful step, every breath that built a room for breath. Her hands are steady. The world is steady. The promise of love is steady. After, the castle becomes a summer market of its own. Courtyards fill with tables. 100 small reunions find their corners. The younger sister becomes a map drawn in motion, leading guests to the balcony with the best breeze, the garden with the gentlest shade, the window where the mountain wears its full dignity. She runs into a young prince at a stairwell turn. He bows too deeply and then less deeply. He admires the architecture. He admires the view. He admires the joy in her laugh. He has a smile that has learned good timing and a coat that has learned to flatter the shoulders it wears. He is charming in the way songbirds are charming when they arrive with spring. She, being made of summer doors open to the day, smiles back and suggests they try the cakes at the end of the Eastern Hall, because cakes are diplomacy no one argues with. Music rises. Dances begin in ripples, then in waves. The elder keeps the pace of a queen, talking, listening, receiving, blessing. She shares a slow, careful dance with her father. She kisses her mother's cheek and forgets who saw. She stands alone for a moment on the balcony to be sure her breath and the day's breath are friends. They are. And then the scene that has waited just behind the curtain of the morning arrives, as scenes do after patience has done its work. Joy stretches a little too far into risk. Words spoken in excitement become promises that should have needed more time. The younger, bright as noon, announces happy news no clock approves. The elder, startled, answers with the learning of years. The charming prince smiles too smoothly. The younger protests too quickly. The heat of 1,000 faces turns the air sugar brittle. Something small and sharp slips. A wave of fear rises in the elder, like a winter wind that missed the weather report and found itself in July. She reaches for breath and finds it just beyond her fingers. The delicate bridge from thought to world tightens, not in kindness. A bloom of cold answers her panic. Glass grows unnaturally at the base of the fountain, blue-white and too bright for summer. An edge skates across the flagstones like a startled bird. People gasp the way a shore does when a cold wave runs too far up the sand. The elder sees, and in seeing, fears more. Fear listens to itself and grows. No shout names her danger. No hand accuses, but a wide circle of space opens, and for someone who loves to curate smallness, the circle feels like a desert. She steps back and the space widens. The servants who have watched her grow understand before anyone else. This is not malice. This is a friend frightened of its own strength. Before anyone can cage the moment with words, she leaves the hall. She does not run past dignity. She carries it out with her intact, as if wearing a cloak that refuses to tear. The castle's quiet corridors receive her like old friends. The gates, still open for celebration, feel the change in the air and try to be helpful by being wide. She passes through them as a swan passes between two reeds, her head high, her breath working hard, her hands holding themselves as if they are full of people she does not wish to drop. The mountain waits the way mountains wait. She heads toward it as you head toward a childhood story when you are grown and lost, and need to remember who you were before the world had all its edges. The path is steep, the snow unseasonal, the sky politely shocked at what it must now hold. She walks with a rhythm that is not a flight and not a dance. It is the rhythm of a new room building itself around her with every step. Behind her, summer realizes it has not been consulted and begins to argue with winter in ways the fish do not appreciate. The fjord coughs and coughs until a sheet of ice slides forward like a too serious handshake. The square turns from waltz floor to white. Sunlight, startled, does its best with the new angles and creates 1,000 diamonds no one asked for. Children think they are beautiful. Elders think of cellars and blankets and the speed with which soup can be made. The queen's hand finds the king's. The younger sister's heart finds a single clear intention. She will go after her. Before she leaves, she does what love taught her in quiet years. She puts people first. She guides the most anxious into the warmest rooms. She opens stores. She calls for wood, for wool, for kettles, and for patience. Then she wraps herself in what will keep her warm and steps out the gate into air that believes it is January and is stubborn about it. On the mountain, the elder finds a part of winter that is not dangerous. It is precise. It is honest. It will not lie, not even to soothe. She asks it to make her a room. It answers with architecture that has been hiding in frost petals all her life. Arches that are prayer and geometry at once. Stairs that accept the foot as if meeting an old friend. Windows that show the world not to exclude it, but to set it at a safe distance until the heart can learn to let it near again. She walks into this palace the way a hand slides into a glove that fits for the first time. She is alone, but not unheld. The wind weighs her name and finds it good. The light weighs her face and finds it brave. The cold, which has been waiting so long for someone to talk to it with courtesy and clarity, sets down its sharpness and brings forward its order. Patterns learn her, and she learns patterns, and the two of them teach one another what it is to be exact without being cruel. Down below, the younger sister gathers a small company, a mountain man whose boots know the snow's moods and whose practical kindness is as dependable as a rope, a reindeer who believes doors are suggestions and hearts are better open, and later a small creature of snow with a carrot for a nose and a personality that seems to have been made of all the laughter saved during the quiet years. They travel as one travels who is fueled by love and by the kind of courage that is bright but not loud. They fall, they get up, they learn the shape of the mountain and the habits of the wind. They argue with wolves gently. They consult elders that look like rocks and are more alive than anybody in town on an early market morning. The castle does not sit idle. The queen rules the emergency with calm. The king wraps his sage around the town. The charming prince offers help with the smoothness of a skater which skates over ice and never tells you what is underneath. He organizes this and that, and many say thank you, because it is a day for accepting hands, even when you write down privately to review those hands later. The journey upward braids stories together, new friends, old promises, a bridge carved by ice over a ravine that would have been impossible yesterday and is a gift today. The younger sister climbs higher than she has ever climbed, not to conquer anything, but to arrive where kindness has gone to hide and invite it home. In a pine clearing, she laughs at a joke she did not expect to find in winter. In a cave, she listens when the mountain exhales and thinks of the quiet nights on the other side of a door, and feels, without bitterness, how long doors can be both help and ache. When she finds the elder, it is not with a shout. It is with a look that has waited for many seasons to be seen. The elder is beautiful, not because of the gown the cold has woven, though it is honest to say it is beautiful too. She is beautiful because she is exactly herself, and she is afraid, and she stands anyway. They speak as people speak, who have been practicing different languages in different rooms, and must now build a bridge between them in sentences that wobble and then stand. Words, even good ones, are sometimes clumsy carpenters. In the moment when they fail, the cold that loves precision but has not yet learned softness returns with its habit, and the mountain room becomes more room, which is to say, more distance, more edge, more stairs between the sisters who want less of all of that. The younger reaches, the elder flinches, the air forgets its manners, and a sharpness slips too near the place where breath is made. The younger learns what it is to be still without giving up. She is brought down the mountain in arms that care. The elder learns what it is to have her absence help no one. She looks outward from her palace and sees the fjord below glassed, and the town in shawls, and the sky trying to do summer through winter and failing, and she understands that hiding cannot be the last chapter. It can be a chapter that keeps someone safe, while safety learns to walk. It cannot be the story's end. Every kingdom that loves truth must pass through a day like this. It must extract its courage from the dictionary and put it into practice. The younger returns to the valley, where living stones keep memories like candles under glass. She asks for help and receives it, but not as a potion, not as a spell, as a sentence about love that is not a prescription but a direction to walk in. The elder faces a visitor who means well and is not well. She learns that kindness cannot placate everything and must sometimes simply stand and protect the future without winning an argument in the present. The day grows later. The sea, under its skin of ice, dreams of waves. The bell, wrapped in cloth to keep them from cracking, wished to ring. The town leans forward the way you do when a story you love has reached a part that hurts and you trust it anyway. The younger moves through it, guided by a compass that was magnetized in childhood in a corridor by a door where laughter waited and did not die. She chooses once, twice, 3 times to put another before herself. The 3rd time is the one the story was waiting for. When it comes, it is not a blaze, not a trumpet, not the toppling of a tower. It is a single act placed exactly where it must be, an act that every grandmother knows how to name and every child recognizes as true even before vocabulary arrives. Love that does not ask for return. Love that stands between harm and the beloved. Love that is so like the warmth of summer that winter remembers it is not the enemy and steps aside. Ice melts as if taught a new grammar, not all at once, not with drama for drama's sake, with relief, with humility, with gratitude. The fjord lifts its sheet and breathes. The boats creak and shake their rigging and laugh. The town staggers into the sun as if it had been sitting too long in a dark theater, enjoying the story, and now needs to blink. The elder learns at last what her hands were waiting for, not merely control, connection. The truth that kindness does not mean hiding power. It means using it in a way that multiplies warmth. She reaches with a new understanding and the old love, and the air answers not with defense, but with delight. The ice that tried to be a wall becomes a path for children. The snow that tried to be a ceiling becomes confetti. The water that tried to stop becomes movement again. The music under the town. The charming prince is revealed as charming only on the surface. This happens naturally when ice transparency becomes moral transparency. The masks people wear often fog in summer. He does not like fog. He prefers mirrors. The queen thanks him for his help, counts what was useful, removes him kindly from where harm could be done, and sends him where he can do less damage, and perhaps read good books until they teach him to be better. The younger returns from the edge of what could have been lost, carrying within her a steadiness that candle flames recognized as kin. The elder returns from the height of what could have been isolation, carrying within her a generosity that rivers recognize as kin. They meet not at a door this time, but in the open square where gates are wide and the sky applauds. Their hug is the kind that makes stone feel it has a heart. The mountain nods. The fjord claps with its little waves against the wood. The coronation has become something more important and less showy. It has become a beginning worth trusting. The gates, which have done their job, seem to grow taller simply by standing where they stand and letting in what must be let in, and holding back only the thing that hurts, which is fear that tells lies. The day ends with candles on every windowsill and no shutters closed. Summer does its best day's work in an afternoon. Children skate on lines drawn not to divide but to guide, Musicians discover that their instruments have learned a brighter song. Bread tastes like relief. Soup tastes like patience, finally rewarded. The stars arrive earlier than expected and stay longer because there is so much to see. And the elder, circlet on, gloves off, stands at the harbor wall and lays a ribbon of frost upon the water that is not a barrier, but a gift. It curls like silver ink. It says, "Welcome home to everyone who lives here, even those who did not know how to live here yesterday." The younger looks up into the warm night and whispers something that is a promise to be as she has always been, only more so. The castle listens. The town listens. The mountain listens. The fjord holds the reflection of a future that smells like lilies and cinnamon and clean snow and says, yes, yes, yes. Chapter 9. The Winter That Never Was. Summer is a generous host. It lays the table with every green it has, checks the place cards twice, and then laughs at its own formality and invites everyone to sit where their laughter likes to sit. That is why the winter that came when it was summer felt to Arendelle like a polite guest arriving on the wrong day with a very large suitcase. For a week the sun looked confused. It climbed at the usual hour and did its usual work, but each time it reached out to warm a stone, the stone smiled and kept its cool. The fjord wore a polished sheet. The fishermen threw pebbles onto it and listened to the strange notes the pebbles played as they skittered across. Children begged to try their skates and promised to keep their mittens on, even though the calendar insisted mittens were not invited. It could have been a disaster. It was not. The closed gates years had taught everyone steps for unexpected music. Cellars were opened. Pantry shelves that liked to show off their neat jars felt proud to be raided. The seamstress who kept a blanket for every season found that the summer blanket, the one with the thin wool and the cheerful embroidery, layered perfectly under the winter blanket, keeping weight in balance with warmth. The younger sister organized warmth like a conductor. She sent wool one way and wood the other. She visited every street and placed jokes as if they were kindling. She made sure that old neighbors had young helpers and that young helpers had soup. She had a way of making people move without making anyone feel pushed. It was a dance of baskets. It made cold look like a temporary inconvenience and community look like a permanent solution. The elder sister learned the ways her hands could answer fear in others. When a child stood on the palace steps and stared at the ice in the fountain as if looking at a dragon, the elder drew a line of frost across the stone and turned it into a curve a small foot could trace. When a shopkeeper worried about a roof under unexpected load, she put her palm out and hail glitter left the eaves and drifted down in soft spoons, every flake landing with a whisper of apology and a promise to behave. News can travel faster than a wind that forgets to put on its coat. Word of winter in summer drifted down the coast, crossed to islands, and went inland along deer paths. Help arrived wearing other banners. Thick ropes of firewood, salted fish, spices that wake soups and make them sing, stories that begin with "We once had a flood in harvest time" and end with "We learned that belonging is a tool, not a posture." Not all the help was helpful. The charming prince who had revealed himself at the worst moment of the best day now tried to retell the story using himself as a lantern. That sort of lantern does not light a room. It lights a portrait. The queen, mindful of diplomacy and in love with truth, assigned him tasks appropriate to his talents: writing thank-you notes, entertaining foreign envoys with discussions of embroidery, standing still in the sun so someone could paint the way the light fell across the courtyard. Meanwhile, the younger sister's mountain path became familiar to her boots. She learned which crags said step here, which gullies said step around, and which wind corners liked to show off and should be ignored. The mountain man and the reindeer kept pace like two lines of a poem that always rhyme even when the rhyme is not obvious. The snow creature made of laughter proved useful in ways that maps never show, making smiles where fear had put fences, distracting wolves with puns, and reminding everyone to sit down and enjoy the view as if enjoyment were energy, which it often is. When the younger returned at last from the last hardest climb, the old sentence about love had become more than a sentence. It had become a muscle that chose, a light that pointed, a certainty that did not need noise. She carried that knowledge down the mountain and through the wide gate and into the square, where she used it as if it were bread, broken and shared. The act that turned the ice to memory rather than city law was remembered as a single motion. In truth, it was the endpoint of years, a slow gathering of quiet courage into one place, one time, one decision. The elder felt it like a bell rung inside her. Love was not her leash. It was her key. It unlocked the tight, bright gift she had feared and let it find the shapes it always wanted. Shapes that were houses for play, not prisons for fear. Bridges to meet upon, spirals to draw eyes upward, patterns that said to every window, "You are welcome to look out and in." The thaw moved out across the fjord, the way a story moves across a room, picked up by one person and given to the next. A crack line became a lace line, became 100 little singing lines. The boats sang back. The sea accepted its sheet back into itself and made no harsh remark about timing. It understands that all seasons are occasionally confused, and all hearts occasionally lonesome. Summer, relief shading its face, did not scold. It simply put plates on the table again. Bees resumed their errands. Lavender exhaled. Seaweed along the rocks returned to its busy shimmering. The town did what towns do when danger passes. It went a little quiet, as the body does after a good cry. Then it remembered the chores it loved, and the games it played, and the people it promised to meet at the corner when the clock marked a certain time. One promise remained to be faced. The elder's mountain palace, which had taught her such precise lessons, stood serene, curved, spired, full of angles that pleased the eye. It was not a mistake. It was not a shame. It was a classroom. Classrooms are left for other rooms when they have taught you the lesson you came for. She did not smash it. She did not lock it. She left with the tenderness of a teacher closing a book and placing it on a shelf within reach of the next student who needs that exact chapter. In the days that followed the strange season, people discovered that the best souvenir of an adventure is not an object you hold. It is a skill you keep and a gentleness you share. The elder wrote a new schedule in the air, and the calendar followed. Once each week the gates would be opened wide just before dusk, and the elder would lay a thin, breath-long ribbon of frost across the square, and the children would skate while the sky learned purple and the lamps learned when to glow. The ice was not there by accident. It was a friendly letter written to the town in the alphabet of winter saying, "I will play fair if you will enjoy me." Stories were told that first summer about the reindeer who thought doors were made for friends, about the mountain man who knew that a well-placed loaf of bread on a cold journey is worth more than a map, about the snow creature who wanted to be introduced to every fireplace in the city and decide personally which one he liked best, and about love that did not posture but arrived and did the necessary thing and left behind no proud footprints demanding applause. Trust is a shy animal, It has to be coaxed. The town coaxed its trust out of the hedges with sunflower seeds and jokes and attendance at weekly skating. Warm days curved into cooler evenings without anyone worrying whether ice would misbehave. It did not. It behaved like a friend with good boundaries and better taste. When autumn came, it did not ask for permission to burnish the birch. It made the leaves into coins, then lanterns, then soft beds for squirrels to wriggle in. The elder learned to use what lived in her hands to help the season do its best work. She protected a late blossom with a glassy bell. She gave the harvest festival tables a rim of frost, so pies cooled faster and hands learned to hover and discuss. It would have been enough, all this, to make a story that ends, tidy, with gratitude. But the river of memory at the top of the world had been humming single notes to the mountain all summer, and the mountain had been humming them down to the fjord at night, and the fjord had slipped them into the palace through the window that forgot how to latch, and the elder had heard them in her sleep. Songs can be invitations. The river is a host who knows how to invite. The call north did not arrive like an order. It arrived like a question that loves you, the kind of question that asks you whether your yes is big enough yet and whether your no will be too small if you say it. The elder listened. She listened while she poured tea and while she watched children skate and while she swept her own practice room, because sometimes queens must hold brooms to remember what hands are for. The younger listened too, across the table between them, and in the hall between their rooms, and in the garden when they picked the last herbs and tied them into bundles for winter. She did not want the question to be asked. She also did not want it to be unasked. That is how love is when it grows tall. The town, without being told, felt the note again, the one under everything. It sensed that the story had turned a page, not to finish, but to begin the next chapter. The elders dimpled their cheeks and folded their blankets. Children asked many times whether weekly skating would continue if the elder was somewhere with no square. Everyone pretended not to cry in public. The day came when the elder, with love and not with drama, put her hands on the castle walls and thanked them for holding her. She kissed her mother's brow and her father's hands. She pressed her cheek to her sister's cheek for as long as it took for the river's song to pass through both hearts and settle there. The mountain was ready. The river was ready. The town was ready in the way towns are ready when they agree to keep all doors open in their hearts. She went north, not away, toward, into the land that had been waiting for a keeper of the quiet things that make everything else possible. She rode where the ice road is not a road but a memory, where the wind speaks in a language the closed years had taught her, where light at midday has the modesty of dawn, and at midnight the confidence of noon. She found the river. She found its truth. She learned that memory is not a museum, not a tomb. It is a living city where the past and the future share soup and do the dishes together. Back in Arendelle, crowns do not like to be lonely. They prefer to be worn by someone whose laughter is an answer to worry. The younger sister took the circlet not as a prize, but as a tool that could carry more warmth if she held it. The coronation was a small one, as coronations go, but the bells rang as if they had been given brand new tongues. The town did not feel deserted. It felt doubled, as if the kingdom were now both where it slept and where it dreamed, and the two places wrote letters to each other on the wind and received answers every morning under the doors. Winter returned to its proper months. Summer learned again how to own the calendar. Spring snuck in early with crocus spies. Autumn put apples in aprons. The elder sent weather like a poet sends postcards, a ribbon of light across the fjord on a day when fishermen needed encouragement, a late snow for the schoolchildren on the last day of lessons, a fog that arrived in time to keep a ship from leaving while a father ran the last 6 streets so his daughter could wave from the dock and say, "Come back soon." The winter that never was became the winter everyone remembered for being in the wrong place on the calendar and the right place in the story. It was the winter that taught the kingdom its day-to-day courage. It was the winter that introduced the sisters to the best versions of themselves. It was the winter that asked the river to sing, and the river obliged, and the mountain nodded, and the fjord smiled, because it loves a good song when the notes have meaning. And because every story that loves its listeners saves a little sweetness for late in the telling, the snow creature with a carrot nose, who had become so good at choosing his favorite fireplaces, learned that some fireplaces travel. He visited both the north and the south. He reported back that stars look similar from both ends if you have the right sort of patience and cocoa. The reindeer stood proudly in both places, as if doorways were indeed suggestions, and the mountain man kept his boots mended, because boots are diplomats. The winter that never was did not end the kingdom. It introduced it to itself, which is what winters, misplaced or not, have always done for anyone willing to walk through them with company and come home again when the path is clear. Chapter 10. Peace over the fjord. Peace does not arrive with trumpets. It comes on foot, carrying baskets. It wears work clothes and good shoes. It sets tables and mends curtains and folds maps. It takes the long way through town so it can greet every cat and every baker. It pauses at the harbor to count the boats, not to check up on anyone, but to admire the different ways wood and rope can belong to each other. In Arendelle, after the winter that taught everyone to listen, peace made itself at home. The gates stayed open as a matter of principle. Open gates do not mean open trouble. They mean open conversation. They mean a place confident enough to offer shelter and wise enough to ask for it when needed. The elder in the north watched with a calm so deep the river sometimes changed its rhythm to match it. She learned ice that sings, and ice that hears, and ice that writes. She learned the names of lights that no one in town had ever needed. She learned that storms can be invited to sit down and explain themselves, and will often do so if spoken to by someone who remembers the last time they were kind. She did not command the wild. She welcomed it into polite society and showed it how to enjoy tea. The younger on the throne led with the same laughter that had persuaded wolves to let a journey pass. She did not turn the palace into a stage. She turned it into a hearth. Markets grew modestly, then generously. Fishermen taught their best secrets at the school on winter Thursdays. Children took turns ringing a small bell at midday to remind everyone to look up from what they were doing and check whether the sky needed a compliment. Weekly skating did not end when the elder left. The new queen, who still believed that biscuits solve more problems than sermons, stood at the edge of the square, cape warm against her shoulders, and caught falling mittens in midair. She learned to skate tolerably well. She learned to fall merrily. She learned that a queen on her backside can teach more dignity than a queen who never risks anything. Letters flowed north and south. They were not always carried by post. Sometimes they arrived in weather. A line of frost along the top of the palace's garden wall spelled, in a language only sisters speak, "Look at the birch tonight." The birch, very proud, produced an aurora, as if wearing the sky's scarf. Another time, Rain on a hot day wrote, as it dried, a brief note on the stone by the harbor, "Nice soup," which the cook saw and pretended not to placate with even more dill, but absolutely did. The elders from the Valley of Living Stones visited once each year at dusk to see whether the town's listening had sharpened or dulled. They found it sharpened. The children had learned to wait for the last sentence of a story before clapping. The grown-ups had learned that clapping is not always required. Sometimes the right response is to bring another chair and let the story sit longer. Peace revealed itself most plainly in the small courtesies that multiplied without anyone taking credit. One house always put a pot of hot water out on the step when snow was heavy, for anyone to warm their hands. Another house hung a basket of old scarves on a peg by the alley for those who had left home on a warm afternoon and been surprised by an evening breeze. The shipwright wrote his notes in a tidy hand, so that when he was gone and someone else stood in his place, work could continue as if a friend had kept the door open all night. There were festivals again, but they were not repeats. They were continuations. The summer lights chose longer strings. The winter candles learned new songs. The harvest wagons rolled not to impress, but to share, and sharing made everything taste bigger. When the first apples came ripe each year, a basket went to the castle, not because it was the castle, but because the cook there made a pie that used citrus peel and a story about a sailor, and everyone agreed certain traditions should be encouraged. Children grew into their skates and then out of them. They grew into duties without discovering bitterness tucked under the seat. The school taught letters and numbers, and also the way to look at a sky and tell whether it wants a hat or a song. The map room taught not only where rivers go, but how a person keeps from getting lost by learning to be a compass for someone else. When a storm threatened, the elder in the north sent a message in the way the wind that plays in the pine needles makes their song, and the new queen in the south adjusted the timing of markets and moved the fragile things under the big roofs. When the sea wanted to come higher than it should, a polite curve of ice asked it to enjoy a different route, and it consented because it prefers elegance when given the choice. When the mountain's shadow ran long through the town in late afternoon and made certain alleys cool, the children knew that was the alley for reading, and the grown-ups knew that was the alley for mending nets where hands would not sweat. There were still quarrels. A good town always argues a little. One year there was a disagreement about whether the market stalls should be painted in one color to look tidy or many colors to look joyful. The queen listened. The elder from afar sent a morning frost that divided the square into a neat grid and then filled each square with a different pattern, proving that order and variety can share a breakfast table. The stalls were painted different colors, arranged in neat rows, and everyone pretended that had been the plan all along. Some evenings the castle held concerts where the program included the sea tapping the dock with its old rhythms and the wind rearranging the curtains softly. On those nights the snow creature sat in the first row with a cup of something warm and applauded loudly at the end, even if there had been no official piece to applaud. Applause was the right thing to do, he argued, whenever the world had behaved so prettily. The reindeer, dignified as ever, adopted a habit of visiting the blacksmith at noon to inspect the shoes cooling on the stone. He approved them with a huff that sounded like a bellows and learned that in peacetime approval often looks like attention without commentary. The mountain man who had helped bring the younger up and down now came to town weekly with blocks of ice carved in interesting shapes for summer storage and incidental beauty. He and the queen argued cheerfully about the best recipe for stew, and never settled it, because leaving something unresolved is a good reason to meet again. There were weddings by the water and christenings under trees, and funerals that made room for laughter as well as rites. The queen spoke often without notes, and never more than needed. The elder sent down long twilights for events that wanted to last, and fast nightfall for events that needed rest. The river of memory sent dreams that were not instructions, but invitations to understand, grandparents. The schools taught the history of the closed years, and the winter and summer, as if teaching someone how to milk a cow. This is how you do it carefully. This is how you do it kindly. This is how you thank the animal at the end. The town learned to be polite to tourists who came to skate in summer and to correct them gently when they assumed the ice was a trick. It is not a trick, the bakers would say. It is a friendship. Friendships have rules. Wear your mittens. Mind the littlest skaters. Admire the patterns, but do not try to copy them with your knife on the table at home. Some things belong where they are. Sometimes the elder visited in person, and the sky took on the specific brightness it saves for those days. She walked the market with her gloves in her pocket, fingers open to the warm air, as if holding the hands of everyone she passed even when she did not. She and the queen sat on the harbor wall with their feet swinging like the pair of children they had once been, and still were when the royal work loosened for an hour. They did not need to speak about distances or duties. Those had been discussed, decided, woven into the fabric. They spoke about whether the gull with the notch in its left wing had a name. They settled on one and told the gull, which pretended not to care, and then circled twice in approval. When she returned north, she did so the way a tide leaves a beach, not suddenly, with little waves of visit still arriving after the larger wave had gone. A late frost that left a fern on the baker's window to encourage patience while the bread cooled. A rain that fell only on the willow in the garden, because the willow wanted to tell a story to the pond and needed applause. A night sky that held off starlight for 2 minutes longer than usual, so the queen could finish a letter. And then there were the nights like the very first night of this long telling. Nights where the fjord wore the moon like a necklace, and the town placed its lamps in the windows, and the mountain gathered a thin veil of silver. On those nights, the entire kingdom exhaled, and the exhale ran through rooms like a good rumor that everyone is safe. The older ones remembered and smiled. The younger ones did not know they were remembering, but their shoulders lowered. The cats chose laps. The dogs settled without being told. The clocks ticked in agreement. When winter came in its appointed turn, it came with the self-respect of a season welcomed rather than feared. The elder shaped the first snow into a skating poem down the center of the square and left the sides dry for those who preferred boots. The queen hung bells at the harbor and asked the sea to ring them with its smallest waves. It obliged, producing a music no composer could have bettered. The valley stones hummed. The river kept its archives and sent down one dream per family, carefully assigned. In spring, the ice went of its own accord, leaving a few delicate sculptures on the north side of things as goodbye gifts. If you walked through Arendelle on a night near the end of such a winter, you would pass houses where candles sat beside books waiting to be finished. You would pass a window where a child traced a snowflake on the glass with a fingertip and then laughed when it vanished and returned. You would pass the oak crest and see, if you were the sort to look closely, that the carved star had learned a new way to glow when the right hand walked by. The last paragraphs of a story like this are not endings. They are doors left ajar, so the reader may walk out into the dark and find that the dark is only the world with its lamps turned down. They are assurances that the lake remembers your reflection without needing to hold it, that the mountain remembers your footsteps without needing to echo them, that the sea remembers your boats without wanting to claim them. Peace over the fjord looks like this, a skating line at dusk with mittens waving in thanks. A queen who sends soup to a house before the house knows it needs soup. An elder who sends a night wind that smells like pine when the town has had a long day and wants to dream well. A market where there is always exactly one extra loaf in case someone new comes to live here today. A harbor that tells travelers nothing false and everything kind. And when the lamps are lowered and the doors latched softly, and the last dog has turned twice and settled, the kingdom says the sentence that it has learned to mean with its whole self. The snow falls soft when it is asked, and plays when it is invited. The waves rest with their faces turned toward the stars. The mountain keeps watch with the patience of stone and the humor of old friends. And you, here in this story and in this room, are home.